Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gold and Guest Talk Tottenham with me, Lee Wilmot, not Rob Guest, as he's away on holiday. And I don't really know why I'm in such a good mood starting here. I should be a bit more morose starting this, shouldn't I, really? Alistair Gold with me today, as usual. I daren't ask how you are, Ali, after Saturday's showing.
Yeah, I'm less upbeat than you appear to be.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I mean, first off, we have to note that Rob Guest is on holiday. Before next time I go on a holiday, he quickly gets that in at the start of a podcast and makes a massive deal about it. Guesty is off traveling the world. He's going to a part of the world that I'm intrigued to see how he gets on, because Guesty is not a man for foods from other parts of the universe. If it comes, out of the if it goes out of the Selby York area, that kind, any food from outside that area is a bit of a struggle for him. So I'm intrigued to see. I shall quiz on that on his return. But yeah, back to Spurs. I could easily just talk about Guesty and his holidays instead of talking about Spurs, because I'd rather do that this week. Horrendous, absolute stinker of a performance. Woeful in comparison, especially to the really positive day at Villa Park just 6 days before. I think I've probably been almost as frustrated with Spurs fandom on social media afterwards. I think that has been, I just kind of have tried to avoid it. I kind of saw it at bits and pieces, and I just thought, oh my goodness, there's been the most hysterical overreaction to just a really bad performance from a young team that's been rebuilt. I get there can be frustrations. I get there can be questioning of certain things that Postecoglou's done, whether he reacted quick enough in the match, things like that, and certainly performances. But, at the start of that game, everyone was buzzing. Everyone was in a positive mood. I put the team out, and I didn't put the team out, but I put the news of the team lineup out, and people were like, oh, that's good. Yeah, that's the team I'd go for. Really full-strength team, yeah. And the players just didn't turn up. It's as simple as that. I think there was an attitude of, we won at Villa, we'll roll over Fulham, forgetting completely that Fulham have been quite decent this year, especially against the big sides. And Craven Cottage has been a difficult place to go for a lot of teams. And it looks kind of Spurs just completely forgot that.
Yep. Yeah, I don't. It's probably the excitement of being on the podcast that's got me upbeat. The podcast that is sponsored by NordVPN, because I think last time I forgot to say it right at the very beginning. I think I've done it again today. So, sponsored by NordVPN as usual. Yeah, there was not a lot for me to be upbeat about on Saturday. I know you want to talk about the social media outpouring in a bit more depth. And before we pressed record on the pod, you did warn me you were going to have a rant about social media. So I look forward to that later. I will just read out because I'm one of the ones that kind of went on social media afterwards. I did put one tweet out after the game on Saturday.
Ooh, okay.
And it read, probably the worst we've played all season, a week after probably the best we've played all season. Spurs, just Spurs. That's me kind of harking back to just what it's been like supporting Spurs in the 40 years that I've been on this planet. And yeah, you can't get away from a bad performance, really, can you? I don't want to be overly critical, because it has been an extraordinary season, and it's Ange Postecoglou trying to kind of set his philosophy onto the team, and there are going to be ups and downs. It's not all going to be plain sailing until he kind of gets his methods across and he gets the players that he wants through the door. So yeah, not me going into the team, but a little bit of frustration, and perhaps too much frustration from certain quarters of the fan base.
Yeah, I mean, you've kind of set it up now, like I'm just slating Tottenham fandom, which I'm not. I should stress it is a minority, and there are people that kind of get really annoyed if I even mention social media, because I'm kind of giving them airtime. But it is frustrating. It's this kind of mindset. And it's only among a few. I completely acknowledge that. And I think there's every right to be frustrated with that game, because it was, oh, I almost said a bad word. It was awful. Let's just use that word. It was horrendous. But this kind of, it's almost like some people exist on social media purely for days like that. It's like someone switches them on. It's like there's a bad result, and it's like a robot kind of suddenly springing to life. They weren't anywhere. Like after the 4-0, there's nothing. There's no. Oh, that was brilliant. Oh, fantastic. Oh, what a kind of insight into how the future could be. It's only when there's a bad result they just suddenly whir to life and just spit out this stuff. And you just kind of think, oh, it almost makes a defeat even worse than it was in the first place, because you kind of, I feel like Spurs have had so many kind of false dawns over the years, and they've had such a high turnover of managers. And don't get me wrong, absolutely number one fault for that is the hierarchy of the club and the decisions they've made. Second in line is probably on a joint basis the managers and the players. But I do think way further down the list, there is a kind of a feeling, and this isn't just Spurs, this is across football fandom, of this constant roller coaster of emotions and calling for a rebuild. Then you get a rebuild, but you don't really like how the rebuild goes because it's painful. It takes a little bit of time, and it's really annoying. Calling for younger players to be used, then younger players are used, and you get a bit annoyed when they're a bit inconsistent and have off days. And it's like, I get it kind of thing, but it's just constant up and down thing. And then people already calling for the manager's head. Honestly, I genuinely saw that. A few people saying, like, I did a piece, we did a piece about the post-season game in Newcastle. Not in Newcastle. That would be a really unexciting kind of
worst pre-season tour ever.
Yeah, exactly. But on that, in Melbourne,
sorry, Newcastle.
Yeah, and somebody kind of commented underneath, hopefully with a new manager. And you kind of think, what? Where does that come from? It's just incredible. Spurs' last 13 Premier League games, they've won 8 of them. They've lost 3. They've lost 3 games in that time. And it's like across the whole season, they're 5th, but they've got a game in hand. Essentially, it's in their own hands because of goal difference. If they outscore Villa, at this point in time, it's in their own hands. And in a season of complete rebuild, of that team is pretty much unrecognisable from. I know that result was not unrecognisable. As you said, that's exactly the kind of Spurs thing. You know, create yourself an opportunity and then chuck it in the bin for a moment. But the team itself, that bunch of players, that is unrecognisable. How many years have we been talking about? It's the same old players year after year letting us down. It's not anymore. That's a completely different team. That there's so many different young players in there that have come in this season. I mean, even just looking at Saturday's team, what do you have? You have Vicario, obviously no Van de Ven, but you had a Doggy. I mean, Porro's relatively new as well. Dragishin in there. Pat Matassar is a relatively new player. James Maddison came in the summer. Brennan Johnson. Who else was playing? Kulusevski and Son obviously have been there a couple of years now. Well, Son a fair few years. But on the whole, the bulk of that side is a really kind of new-looking side. So there's so many things that are changing, and there's a state of evolution trying to happen there. But it just kind of feels like, I don't know, we start waving the white flag as quickly as possible after a totally rubbish match. There is no getting away from it. It was a rubbish match. But to then decide that, and it's funny, isn't it? Every good win, there's nothing. And every defeat, it suddenly Ange's out of his depth. And, you know, this isn't Scotland or Australia or Japan. And you get people saying this sort of stuff. It's like, well, make your mind up. Is he a good manager in terms of they haven't been beaten this year in the Premier League by Arsenal, Man City, Liverpool, Man United? Was he out of his depth then? Maybe I missed that. I don't know. But then suddenly, he'll lose to Fulham in a game where the players just didn't turn up. And suddenly it's all his fault. It's just, I wasn't going to make it a rant. Then you mentioned the word rant and it became a rant. But and again, I'm not blaming the fans for Saturday's result. The players were absolutely dreadful. And Postecoglou, I didn't feel reacted as quickly as he could. I still don't go with this assertion that there's 2 kind of lines of thought. There's one, he just stands there on the sideline doing nothing. Oh my goodness, how many times have I heard that about various managers over the years? You know, ignore the fact that there's been so many games this season where he's changed it with his substitutions, where the substitutes have come on providing an assist or a goal, or the system has slightly tweaked and it's been different and they've done it. Let's ignore that because he stood on the sideline watching the game. Look, which is exactly what he does in every game. He said this himself. That's how he operates. He observes a game and then he'll tell his coaches exactly what he wants to happen and who comes on, whatever. It's just the way he is. But But yeah, could he have acted a little bit quicker? Maybe. I think the midfield was struggling. I mean, yeah, there's a question for you. What was the biggest area of or problematic area for you on Saturday?
It's difficult to say. I think you're right. The midfield did struggle on Saturday, and I know we're gonna. I don't want to criticise him, but I know we're going to talk about him later. But Radu Dragusin, I think, struggled a little bit at the back as well. There a number of occasions in the first half where Fulham were just in behind our defence, and it was on Dragusin's side. Just I can't even remember. Muniz, obviously, Willian was playing there. Just there always seemed to be a kind of pocket of space in our box. As Fulham either got a cut back or played a ball in behind, and I think we did just I don't know whether it was he wasn't getting the support from the midfield, or he was just in his first game against. Let's be honest, they're not a bad side, Fulham. They've got a very good home record, and they've got a striker at the minute who is in real rich vein of form for someone that no one really knew about before this season. So yeah, I just think they got in behind us too easily on Saturday, and you're right. We can blame Postecoglou for not making substitutions quickly enough. I watched Chelsea yesterday when I was working, and Pochettino's 2 substitutes. Well, he had made more than 2, but had a massive impact on the game. Scored the 2 goals that got them through eventually against 10-man Leicester.
But Spurs fans used to say that about Pochettino.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but they came on and made an impact. You're looking at Timo Werner had a glorious chance which he put wide. Richarlison had a chance which could have gone either side of the post, and then you're looking at 2 substitutes who have made an impact. Just didn't quite happen for them. But that's me going off on a tangent. I think the players have got to take the responsibility on Saturday, because there were none of them really for me turned up. I don't think any of them had a good game.
No, I think the only 2 maybe you could say weren't too. I don't think Romero was bad. I thought Romero was okay. He's certainly.
But then as a vice captain, does he need to kind of lead Dragusin through that game?
Absolutely. That's why I'm not letting him off the hook entirely. I didn't think Vicario was awful. I thought he made a few good first half kind of contributions. But like you say, not even just the second half chances, but Son, Maddison, Johnson all had chances in the first half. Despite it being a horrendous performance, 1 or 2 of those goes in and the course of the game changes completely. And it's just so kind of how tight football is, and it can be all on one kick. For me, I mean, let's go straight to Dragusin. I was going to talk about the midfield, but actually, as you brought him up, it kind of maybe is fair to have a bit of a counter to that in terms of I felt he was not helped by Udogie. I thought Udogie was so kind of raiding up and down the left. And there was, I mean, like the second goal, Iwobi just walked past Udogie. That was not one of his best performances at all. I think there were too many times for Dragusin where he was trying to come across and cover areas of the pitch he maybe didn't need to. And that's inexperience. That's not knowing the system, not knowing the other players. Definitely, look, it wasn't the greatest debut we've ever seen. Muniz did get in behind him, I felt, too easily in that pocket of space for the first goal. Second goal, he kind of came across. Third one, could he have reacted a little bit quicker, maybe, to the Muniz essentially booted Muniz into the ball in the end. I actually thought it was an own goal at first until I kind of saw the close-up. Yeah, it wasn't ideal. What I would say in his defence, as a defender, he did show nice bits of composure on the ball at moments. There was a few little kind of Cruyff turns when he got away from players. And I even felt, maybe more importantly, after they'd conceded those 3 goals, he was still quite composed, which shows he's kind of, it's not going to have shaken him. Was it as awful a debut as, let's say, Pedro Porro? No. Pedro Porro had a shocker against Leicester and obviously has gone on to be a really effective player for Spurs, although he wasn't good either on Saturday. Kulusevski had a dreadful debut. Was it against Brighton? I'm trying to remember who it was. Maybe in the Cup. Yeah, and then he obviously went on an incredible run for the rest of that season as well. But yeah, with Dragusin, I'm not going to say too much because it was his first game. I did feel like he was constantly trying to make up for others. But the simple kind of, I guess, thing you can say is he Mickey van der Ven? No, he's a different kind of player. Mickey van der Ven is the fastest player the Premier League has ever seen. And obviously, naturally, in a system that has a high line, a player like that is going to mop up everything pretty much, or the bulk of stuff. But I would say about Dragusin, only 6 days earlier at Villa Park, he was up against one of the best informed strikers in the game right now in Ollie Watkins across Europe. And yeah, I know they were against 10 men eventually, but he had a good 15, 16 minutes where he was up against Watkins and Bailey, and he dealt very well with it. And I think that's because the team around him was far more organised and less chaotic than they were on Saturday. So yeah, I think there's a long way to go for him, and this was only his first start. So yeah, I'm not probably going to too much on him. For me, I just thought the midfield was awful.
Yeah, I didn't want to stick the boot into him because
it was atrocious. I couldn't believe he dug him out so badly.
I've actually felt sorry for him. That kind of, it does feel like it's all been pinned on him. And yes, it wasn't a great game, but as I've said, no one. I didn't think anyone had a great game. It just makes you realise how good a player Mickey van der Ven is when he's not in the team, doesn't it? Really, essentially. Yeah. But yeah, go back to the midfield.
Yeah, no, Van der Ven is superb. He is a wonderful player, and you can see how well he fits the system. And it's just keeping him fit now. You know, that's the trouble with these pacey players, is the hamstrings, and you're going into a work with a manager who unfortunately destroys people's hamstrings in that first year. There are a lot of hamstring injuries in Postecoglou teams as they adapt, and hopefully he will adapt, and that'll be that. But yeah, the midfield for me was where the biggest stink out happened, because honestly, and it was so frustrating because I thought they were really good against Villa, that trio. This is the same three players who, at the start of the season, those first 10 games or so, people were saying they were perhaps up there with the best midfielders in the Premier League at that point. It was so undisciplined on Saturday. They made the Postecoglou system look like a complete kind of train wreck of a system. They made it look really open and awful, because Pat Matasar, again, a 21-year-old, it's going to happen. He's going to be superb at Villa Park, set up a lovely goal for Maddison, but then the next week we'll have a game where maybe, I'm absolutely speculating, this may not be the case, but maybe he just got a little bit ahead of himself. Maybe he thought, like, I'm this world beater, look at me, and he just kept charging up the pitch, getting caught out of position, and that was actually making Basuma look worse. And he wasn't alone. Maddison was doing the same. Maddison was all over the place at times. And Basuma was left so many times as the sole kind of player, a bit like Jon Snow in Game of Thrones with the army coming towards him. And the trouble was, Basuma's not in the right form right now to be able to even take on that task. And so he's looking up and he's seeing, let's say, Porro up the other end of the pitch. He's got caught up there. And if you've got Porro and Sarr both caught up there, Basuma's going to have to come across to the right. Someone took a snapshot or a screenshot of one part of the game, and that was exactly what happened. You had kind of Sarr up the pitch somewhere, Porro up the pitch somewhere, Basuma was at right back, and Fulham just had the entire double-decker lane, essentially, through the middle of the pitch to go through. And that, again, is another kind of whack of pressure on Dragusin and Romero to have to deal with the hordes coming towards them. So, yeah, I was really disappointed with the midfield. And that's the area for me that I do feel like the players need to take the bulk of the blame for this. And Sonny essentially said that afterwards. But if there's anywhere where maybe Postecoglou could address that a bit earlier, I think it was that midfield. And it could have been just saying to Sarr, look, okay, I get it. You know, you're very young. You've created a chance for himself. He did a bit of pressing that got him the ball, and he couldn't quite sort his feet out to get the ball away. But ultimately, it's just not your day. And what I'll do is I'll bring on a not too shabby replacement in, let's say, Rodrigo Bentancur. He comes in there, and suddenly, you know, there's a little bit more discipline maybe in the midfield. Maybe not the same dynamism and mobility, but definitely a little bit kind of something different against what Fulham were doing. Make it more of a double pivot. Or I know he's kind of almost like, I don't know if he's like persona non grata because he's probably leaving in the summer, but Højbjerg. You know, Højbjerg came on against Villa. Yes, it was against 10 men, but I thought he was really bright. And then actually when he came on at Fulham, I thought he was actually quite bright as well. And they suddenly had a little bit more control. And yes, Fulham were stepping down a gear or two, but I do wonder whether there's this reluctance to kind of use him too much because he's clearly not the future. And maybe that would be compromising principles. I don't know. But I think bringing him on alongside Basuma, maybe allowing Maddison then to sit in front of them as a bit of a number 10, almost like a 4-2-3-1, maybe. I don't know. I think, yeah, that's one area that I would look to say that I think Postecoglou could have reacted that a little bit quicker, yes, I think that was the area, because that midfield was really struggling. And I don't think it's any coincidence that eventually he was like, yeah, all three of you off. The entire midfield came off. And you kind of think, yeah, if you'd maybe tweak that a bit sooner, maybe it's a hindsight call looking at that, maybe in the moment. I mean, the second goal, it's one of those where I've seen some people kind of saying like, oh, it was quite lucky it hit his knee. I don't think it was lucky. I think he was just trying to get any part of his body in the way. I think it was quite a well-worked move and just poor defending. But yeah, midfield for me had a bit of a stinker, really. Although that's kind of also taken away from the attack. What did you make of the attack?
I'm just going to with you there. I was surprised Postecoglou didn't make a change at half time, given how poor we were in the first half. I was surprised Bentancur didn't come on at half time.
He doesn't make many half-time changes, does he? That is one thing he doesn't do. But not many managers do. It was like that was the Mourinho thing, wasn't it? He would do that. I think sometimes they give them 5 minutes to see whether they adjust to what they've told them at half-time more often than not.
But yeah, for as good as we were against Aston Villa, and particularly in the second half, I thought he was excellent. But I didn't think Maddison had the best of first halves at Villa Park against Aston Villa, and turned it around obviously in the second half. And then again on Saturday, just wasn't at the races. But then again, I don't want to pick. I seem to have been picking players out, but I don't want to pick players out because, as I say, they were all pretty shocking. But he was not anywhere near the level that we know James Maddison can get to. Yeah. And I know he was getting a few fouls here and there.
I think he had a little problem in the week as well. I think he had a little bit of an ankle issue in the week, from what I understand. Not serious enough to kind of keep him out of contention, but whether that played a part, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just. He's been around long enough now to expect the kind of those fouls that are going to come his way. He's not going to always get the time on the ball that he wants to have. So you could sense him getting a little bit frustrated out there on Saturday. But yeah, the attack. I don't really know what to say about the attack on Saturday. I thought Brennan Johnson. Yeah, Brennan Johnson showed a few nice little touches and tried to get at the back line a little bit in the first half. And I wasn't too despondent with what he did. Sonny, not great on Saturday. Kulusevski, it was Kulusevski, wasn't it? See, I'm forgetting. It's such an unmemorable performance. I'm forgetting who was even playing up front. But yeah, he wasn't at it either, was he? There was just no cohesion up there at all, and nothing really stuck. It was just moments here and there that you were kind of hanging your hat on, essentially, and it just didn't quite happen for us. Yeah,
I felt there was three players that have all had such a big impact in the last few games, almost like they just switched off. And I'm, one of Brennan Johnson's kind of biggest supporters because I can kind of really see what he's capable of doing. I thought that was one of his weaker games. He just didn't really kind of make much of an impact. He was one of the probably harder workers, funnily enough, in the team, but he just didn't quite show the quality that he has in recent games. Sonny barely touched the ball. Sonny just didn't really get too much of the ball, and when he did, he lost it a few times, as did Kulusevski.
Brennan Johnson is a young player. Let's be clear about that with everyone.
Well, that didn't stop you digging out Dragusin, did it?
No, I know that. But what you're saying there is that he showed glimpses in that he will be, as a young player, he's not a leader. He will thrive off other players around him taking the lead and showing what they can do to get him revved up and going. And he's not going to be able to do that by himself, essentially, as a young new player in this team. So someone you want to drive forward, yes, that's in his game, but he needs other players to bring that first, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it's really nice that you're backing up the young players now. Yeah, no, I agree. I do. I think Sonny was very quiet. I still haven't entirely decided whether I prefer him on the left or through the centre. Some games through the centre, he looks spectacular. And then sometimes they switch him back out to the left and he looks even more spectacular. I don't know. I still don't know whether the central striker debate has been settled yet at all. It could be it ends up being Richarlison, or Richarlison ends up being an option up there. I still feel that's where they'll look in the summer, like a real number, a natural number 9. You know, that Batistuta shirt you've got behind you kind of makes you think that kind of presence up front wouldn't be too shabby. Obviously, I don't think he'd be much good now, Batty goal, but
it did feel like Ange didn't want to give Richarlison too much. He's clearly not quite there in terms of fitness. He came on a lot later than I would have thought, given we were the 2-0 and then 3-0 down. And yeah, he had a great chance, and I think Richarlison on the top of his form can hold the ball up and bring other players into play. We've seen it a number of times already this season. So yes, I think it was just unfortunate that Ange didn't trust him to have too many minutes on the pitch on Saturday.
Yeah, he did make an impact when he came on. Again, it's so I kind of add the caveat of Fulham were 3-0 up, so we'd probably stepped off the gas a fair bit. Kulusevski, this was the Kulusevski of the first half against Villa. Second half, Kulusevski at Villa was phenomenal. You know, he was involved in the 3 of the 4 goals. This was more like the first half, where it was very Lucas Moura-y. It was very, I'm going to charge with the ball, I'm going to beat a man, get everyone excited, and then I'm going to run in into either the second or the third person. Kulusevski, for me, the reason I don't put him squarely in the Lucas Moura category is because he does make some, when he's switched on and sharp, he makes really good decisions with the ball. And that's why, you know, he's one of these guys that maybe isn't getting the assists and goal numbers that you would expect. But if you look at the pre-assist and the pass before that in so many of Spurs' goals this season, it will have been Kulusevski. But he is starting to slip into this little bit of a habit of his go-to thing when he's maybe lower confidence is, well, I know I can beat a man. So that's great. But then you've got to do something with the ball afterwards that makes a real difference. And if you're then just going to run out of play or run into another player, I think he had the most unsuccessful touches on the pitch yesterday. I think it was definitely among the Spurs players. He's not quite kind of finding that same groove yet. But again, another young player. What was he, 23 years old? It's one of those, I've already seen some people, I've seen a few players we should sell lists, which have Brennan Johnson on them. I saw that yesterday. Had Kulusevski on it as well. It's quite incredible how quickly we write off players now. It's I don't know whether when you and I were young, you know, back in the 1950s, I don't remember the rush to judge people so quickly. Maybe there was, or maybe just social media has provided that outlet now. I don't know.
I think it was just spoken rather than out there for everyone to see forevermore.
Maybe, yeah.
I'd go into school after a Tottenham defeat and go, oh, that was bleep, wasn't it? We were shocking.
At school, did you? Wow.
not all of us went to a posh school like you did, Alistair.
No, I didn't go to posh schools. But yeah,
but Kulusevski, I love him. I think he's a wonderful talent. But you're absolutely right. Sometimes you don't know what Kulusevski you're going to get on a given match day. Sometimes he can be absolutely phenomenal, and other days you could just watch the match passing by.
Yes, absolutely. And then obviously we had Timo Werner came off the bench. The real shame about it is I felt he probably made the biggest impact of any of the attackers. He came on and he ran at them. He got lots of space. He got in behind. But then he missed that chance. And unfortunately, that's the Timo Werner issue, isn't it? He can do so many good things. And then I'd loathe to call it a big moment, because whether it would have changed the game or not, I don't know. But certainly it was a moment where he should have scored. And that was Brennan Johnson, wasn't it? That was Brennan Johnson.
There was plenty of time left after that as well.
Yeah, so maybe. But, he just he almost angled it wide. It was almost like he meant to put it wide. And yeah, his shooting was poor. There was one shot. It was very awkward. The Spurs fans had just unfurled a banner saying "Save our seniors," which, you know, absolutely spot on. Great sentiment. It's all to do with the season ticket kind of controversy of the last couple of weeks and Spurs' decisions for next season. They unfurled this banner. I don't know. It goes across maybe 10 different people. A sliced Werner shot almost hit them with the banner. It was like, I don't think Daniel Levy paid him to do that, but my goodness, it was oh, that couldn't have summed up the match, I think, any better than, you know, a striker who or an attacker who maybe just doesn't have that quality sometimes in those moments. Although we say that, he'd scored in back-to-back the last couple of games.
Yep.
It was just a day when everything was off. Every player was off key, pretty much. The system looked terrible. The substitutions were too late. I still go back to my point right at the start. I just think there were too many players that did that classic Spurs, ridiculous Spurs thing of, oh, we've beaten a very good side away from home in a high-pressure match. We're getting loads of praise. We're so going to turn over the next team. And I don't know where that confidence comes from. It's Tottenham Hotspur. They should never have that confidence in themselves. They should know that they've got to work so hard for every single thing they get. And this is, we've heard this from so many managers now. Maybe that's the most frustrating thing, is that you change the manager, change the players, but there's still this complacency that creeps in from absolutely nowhere. Yeah.
The thing for me is that it always, and it might just be a kind of a football fan thing. It might just not just be related to Spurs, but always when there seems to be a little carrot on the end of something, like, oh, no one else is playing, here's your carrot of you can move up to this place, or you can go to the top of the table or whatever. We never kind of see it through. Never happens that, oh, we can go fourth. And I don't like to have that kind of fourth place trophy. It's not a trophy, but it's what everyone's aspiring to be. We all know Spurs deserve to be want to be in the Champions League. That's where a club of the kind of stature that we are now.
And Postecoglou might disagree.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We'll have a debate about that in a bit.
Yeah, but that's where we all want to be. So fourth is what's going to guarantee it. Fifth might end up getting it, obviously, but that was there for us. Fourth was there for the taking on Saturday, and given Villa only drew with West Ham, although it could have been worse for them, it just always doesn't kind of come to fruition for Spurs when those little carrots are there for you on the end of a stick.
Well, exactly. I mean, I did a piece, didn't I, in the week? It was just purely on the mathematics of it. Simply pointed out, as I did on the podcast, that look, if Spurs could get their act together and win the next two games, they would be 5 points off the top by the time the big boys came back, the top three. And of course, Spurs do what they do. I did make it very clear, massive if Spurs win those two games. I was not saying Spurs are in the title race. I was just saying, you know, as someone that has supported Spurs all my life, I'm well aware that Spurs were probably my fault. Maybe it was all my fault. But I knew that at least one of these games they were probably going to mess up in some way. But I was purely stating mathematically Spurs could put themselves into this position. And of course, my goodness, as soon as the final whistle went, certain Arsenal fans who clearly had seen it had been waiting, saying, oh, see, stupid Spurs fans, and all of this. They just came out of the woodwork as well. That is the unfortunate nature of our job, that, you know, we have to write things. We have to kind of write what we see and observe and think, and sometimes football clubs can make you look daft, even if your intentions were straightforward and honest, and not trying to claim. I think I even wrote in the piece that, you know, I don't think anyone is seriously actually putting Spurs in the title race, but mathematically they could put themselves around it if they were to win. They did not win. You could just have a narrator's voice over the top. Hugh Grant was sat in front of me at Craven Cottage. I could have done with his voice over the top. You know, just Tottenham did not win the game. They were rubbish, and something like that. That wasn't a Hugh Grant impression.
No, it wasn't a very good one. If it was,
no, it wasn't meant to be. I could have done his Oompa Loompa voice.
But you heard it here first, anyway. Alistair Gold to blame for Tottenham defeat to Fulham. That's the next headline on football.london later today.
Yeah, well, social media sometimes seems to think it is my fault, so I'll take it. Fine.
Interesting. Just I wanted to bring up. I know we'll let you talk about NordVPN and the benefits of using it in a second, but I just wanted to bring up something interesting, and that we'll probably write a piece on at some point, maybe today or later this week. The team Spurs have lost to this season in the Premier League, how are currently in the table fourth. Obviously, that Villa game at home.
Yep.
Which when we absolutely battered them, to be fair, and probably should have won the game. Yeah. That aside, we've lost to teams in 7th, 8th, 9th, 11th, and 12th. So we're pretty good. Pretty good against the teams at the top. and pretty good against the teams at the bottom, but the teams in the middle of the table, not so good at.
So maybe that's a complacency. Maybe that's exactly that. Maybe if you go in being slightly complacent against teams in that middly section, they've got enough quality to punish you for it, whereas maybe the teams at the bottom don't, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, so, but this all goes back to my Ange's been found out thing. I don't think it is. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's just for his system to work, everyone has to do their very set task. And if there's any complacency or they feel they can go wandering without sticking to the structure, because this is the thing, it's almost like there's a suggestion that there's no structure to his team. There is. You know, even when the wing backs come in, the fullbacks come inside, the inverted fullbacks, there's still other people go. It's quite total football-y. There's someone else goes out there to cover. But if they're not all doing their jobs properly, that's when it falls apart. You know, I know there's people that say, oh, he should have a plan B and things like that. But the system does tweak. There are times when one of the fullbacks won't be coming in. There are other times when, you know, just naturally by changing the kind of midfielders they've got, it will change it. Or changing the wingers you've got, like a Kulusevski will come inside more. I actually thought Kulusevski was better than Maddison when he came inside as they changed the midfield later on. But then, you know, when you've got a pacey winger like Werner, you know, Werner might not track back and help Udogie as much. So Udogie has to stay a little bit more as a more natural left back. So there are ways the system changes. This kind of idea that it's just constant chaos isn't really right at all. But no, it's an interesting kind of thing to note that the bulk of these teams have all been around that middly table area. And yeah, that's something for Postecoglou to analyse with his coaches and fix, really. You know,
and I'm sure he already has. He's a data driven man, isn't he? As we spoke about when he first came in.
Yeah, he does like his data. So it's just a shame to go international break. I seem to have messed up and killing me when I have to do my international break content and articles and things like that. Each time, I mean, when I had the Chelsea postponement, that 2 weeks, didn't they lose to Wolves just before that? Yep. And they lost to Wolves before the November international break, I think it was as well. Cheers, Spurs. Thanks a lot. 2 weeks writing for depressed Spurs fans.
I was going to say, if it's not difficult enough to get people onto the site during 2 weeks without football, Spurs going and losing right before the 2 weeks off doesn't help matters, does it?
Terrible. It just changes the entire mood. It's crazy. I mean, look, Spurs are in 5th. You know, they're 3 points off 4th with a game in hand. They're doing absolutely fine. Like I say, this is a team that has been completely overhauled. It was a team that lost its best player, and you know, on social media, I hate to hark back to it, but most people were saying mid-table. I saw some people saying relegation candidates if Kane goes. You know. And it has not been that way. They've been up there for most of the season, pretty much. You know, Postecoglou won, manager of the month 3 times in a row at the start of the season. This dreadful manager, apparently, who you know is out of his depth in the Premier League, which is very impressive to win 3 Manager of the Month awards in a row in a competition you're out of your depth in. And yeah, it's just patience. And I know we haven't got patience because we're fans of a football club that have starved us of trophies. You know, 1 trophy in however long the ENIC era is dreadful. That is horrendous. And I know that's where a lot of frustration comes from. But when you get a manager who, I think he does have a real idea of what to do, and we're going to talk about that with the top 4 debate that he's been going on about as well, you've got to give him a bit of time. But yeah, no, we'll have a chat about that in a moment.
Yes. Do you want to talk us through the benefits of NordVPN before we go into Ange and his top 4 ambitions or lack of ambitions sort of thing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I tell you, I wish I was using NordVPN on a holiday right now. I guess I really do. Not to be away from your company or anything, but just because, Guesty's got a brilliant habit of booking every international breakup for a holiday. He's very clever. I think he knows them years in advance.
He does it before you get there.
He certainly does. I think he gets in touch with like UEFA and just works out exactly what dates he should take off.
The problem for NordVPN is that Guesty likes to switch completely off and not get involved with any sort of technology or anything like that while he's on holiday, doesn't he? So he probably won't be using the benefits of NordVPN that you would.
No, he won't. No. It's more me that uses that. People know that because I've mentioned that. If I'm heading off, I'll whether it's just watching movies or streaming stuff in some little downtime, while I'm watching Spurs in the queue for the Tower of Terror, as I did a couple last month or whenever it was. Yeah, I mean, everyone knows what I think about NordVPN because it's something I've used for years, and it's something that we've had a really good partnership with them over the last couple of years with the podcast as well. And it's nice to see people telling us that they've used it as well because of our recommendation. And that helps us as well because it all makes us look really good to NordVPN as well. So it's like a bonus either way. You've heard me say it enough times. NordVPN is the fastest VPN in the world, and that means there's no buffering, no lagging, and you can stream your favorite shows from anywhere in the world without your bandwidth throttling. And not only that, the outlay on a NordVPN subscription is cheaper for you in the long run, and that's because you can purchase streaming services, like I said. You could even book flights from your destination country rather than booking them as if you're doing it from the UK just by setting your device to thinking it's there. Sometimes it can work out cheaper that way. There's also security aspects to it as well. If you want to use it with public Wi-Fi abroad, it can help you just a little bit to start trying to lock up your phone or your tablet or whatever it is to stop people getting in there and taking things you don't want them to take off there. So it means you're paying out for Nord, but you're actually saving money overall. There's a whole host of other benefits, to be honest, from signing up to NordVPN. It's more than worth looking at it and seeing all the different things that you can get out using the service. And to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/goldguest. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money back guarantee. And also, as I said, you're helping the podcast in doing so. The link, in case you just missed it there, it is in the episode description box if you have a little look.
Lovely stuff. So yes, we're going to talk about Ange Postecoglou and his comments on the top four. So he's been accused of being a bit spiky with Sky Sports after the game on Saturday, saying that the top four race was over, or joking that the top four race was over because Tottenham lost the game to Fulham and were 2 points behind Villa, since gone to 3. Look, it's all over. So we'll just go for 6th. He said, what am I supposed to say to that? We're 2 points behind Villa. What does that mean with 10 games to go? What are 10 games to go? Psychologically, I don't really worry about that stuff. It's 10 games, so there's so much football to be played. If we had one today, nothing was guaranteed. Could have lost last week, nothing was guaranteed. So I don't worry about that stuff and never have. It's caused a bit of a stir with Spurs fans, obviously. For a club like Spurs, as I've said already, that is the kind of the ambition at the beginning of every single season. Top 4 is the first ambition, and then look ahead. And if we can go higher than that, then great. We've got a manager at the minute who doesn't want to think about any of that. He will come in and say, right, number 1 is what I'm aiming for. And I suppose in a way, most managers will say that. That's what their plan is. They want to be number 1. Some will have different ideas and will come into different clubs and not think that they can actually see that through, essentially. But Ange Postecoglou obviously feels like at Tottenham, that's what he can aim for, and that's what he can achieve. So I've got nothing against it, really. That's what he wants to do. That's where he wants to take the club, and that's where I think all the fans want to go, essentially. So, what did you make of it? What's been the reaction to what he said?
It's an interesting one. Actually, as we're saying this, it looks like Nottingham Forest have been deducted 4 points.
Have they?
It looks like it. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. Somewhere, I think I just heard Guesty scream with delight. So
that would put them in the relegation zone. Luton back out of it.
They would. I'm sure. Again, that's going to be such a mess. It's going to be so. The end of the season is just going to be chaotic because there's more to come, isn't there, as well? I think for Everton as well, isn't there? Second charge and things like that.
Of course, yeah, they're waiting. Like Forest were waiting for theirs. It was the same for Everton, so I'm sure we'll find out about Everton in due course as well. Could you imagine? Poor Guesty, but could you imagine if Everton were to survive by less than 4 points, the 4 that they got back from their original 10-point deduction. It is going to be a mess, isn't it? Absolute mess.
Yeah. It's going to be one of those where it's going to lead to all kinds of like litigation, like clubs suing the Premier League, and it's just going to be horrendous. But back to Tottenham, who, hey, Spurs are safe from relegation at this point. I saw someone tweeted that before the game. I think that they'd reached the point where they couldn't actually get relegated. God, that was depressing. And in fourth place. Right. So, yes, it's one of those where in the press conferences now, us regulars kind of have a wry, slight smile on our face when someone who hasn't been in recent press conferences comes in and mentioned anything that relates to the top 4 race, 4th spot, 5th place in the possible extra Champions League spot, European football. If you mention any of those things, the response is going to be the same. He's going to, I'd say on the whole, politely explain why it doesn't mean much to him. Yes, I did think his Sky interview was a bit flippant. I thought it was a little bit, it started to cross the line into being a bit of an arse, really. It wasn't great. I didn't think it reflected on him particularly well, that one. And look, I understand the logic of where he's coming from. I would say he's coming into a league that makes such a big deal of the top 4. We do. It is naturally a massive thing. It's all about the Champions League. It's all about the riches that come with the Champions League, all of this sort of stuff. And I can very much imagine the conversation between Ange and Daniel Levy would be a fascinating one to see on the top 4 kind of thing. You know, Daniel Levy going, oh, but we are going to make a lot of money out of this. And, it's great for the club. And Ange going, don't care. Don't care. The team's not ready. I don't care. And it's just like, it would be very interesting to see how that played out. Be a fly on the wall in that one. Because, there is logic to what he says. The mere presence of Champions League football does not indicate that you're ready for it or anything like that. As he said, we've seen it with Man U and Newcastle this season. They have not been equipped for it. And it's kind of actually almost derailed the rest of their season. They haven't been able to cope with it at all. Spurs under Conte, it was just such an exciting end to that season. They got Champions League football, and we know what happened next. They absolutely fell apart as that next season went on, and it really didn't show any kind of indicator of where the club were at all. I would also say I've seen kind of people going down the route of, but if you got the Champions League, you can sign better players. I don't actually think that's the case anymore. I don't subscribe to that quite as much. I think back in the past, definitely. I think if you're a club like a Spurs that weren't maybe seen as one of the big boys, if you got into the Champions League, suddenly some stars might look at you and think, oh, well, hey, they're in the big league, maybe. Why not? But I actually think now the Premier League is so huge. I think any Premier League club pretty much has got a chance of signing big players. I would, even look at this season alone. Spurs have beaten Bayern and Barcelona to 2 signings. It doesn't matter that Spurs weren't in the Champions League. I don't think that's quite the thing it is anymore. And I would actually say that probably Spurs' best signings have come in seasons where the next year they didn't have Champions League football. I mean, last summer was a terrific summer, I thought, for signings. But certainly in the Poch era and things like that, I think some of the summers they had under him before they got into the Champions League were actually when he did most of his best transfer work. The likes, I guess, of Sonny, Alderweireld, players like that coming in. But yeah, it's I get it. The only thing I would say to counter it, I think players need a target. I do. I can understand his logic in saying my only target is growing this team, and that's great for him as a target, but it doesn't really give anything for the players to kind of latch on to as a real driving motivational force. And look, I get it. They're footballers. They should be trying their best, whatever, all of that. I know that. But psychologically, it doesn't always work like that. Whereas with Conte, yes, I've just explained why it didn't really amount to much in the next season. But in that season, there was a point, I don't know whether it was 10, 15 games to go, whatever it was, when he switched from having no target to publicly saying, we're going for the top 4. And he even kind of made went at pains to say, I feel these players need something to drive them now. They need to know that they can do this. And we saw what's happened in the second half of the season. You know, the terrific win against Arsenal. They pulled it out the bag and they finished fourth, and they finished the season really, really well under Conte. And yes, it ended up leading to nothing, but I just felt it kind of really pushed on the team. I do think having Champions League football is a motivating factor within a club. I think it has that buzz around the club. It makes you feel, even if you're not, I suppose, that you're moving in the right direction, and then it's up to you to capitalize on that. So I get it. I get where he's coming from, but I also kind of feel like maybe because it's a new thing to him, this top four idea, he's dismissing it a little bit quickly. It's not going to stop the media talking about it. It's not going to stop anyone asking him about it. But what I would say is I like the mentality idea of it, that he's saying to the fan base, people within the club, I guess the likes of Daniel Levy and people like that, we're not aiming for top four. Don't aim for the top four. You want to create a club that next season is challenging for the title. You know, you don't want to create a club that is thinking, yes, want to get in the Champions League. Yes, can't wait to get in that fourth place. You know, you want a club that is aiming for the very top. And Spurs can do that on the Postecoglou. They can challenge. I think we're in an era now where the accepted kind of norm is, oh, you know, City are going to be really strong, Liverpool are going to be really strong. But you're coming up to an era where we're going to have a post-Klopp Liverpool. We don't know how that transition is going to work. Pep's not going to stay at City forever. You've seen that Arsenal have kind of done what Spurs did under Pochettino, that they've built a younger team that is challenging that kind of stranglehold at the top. Whether they get there is another thing. They have been able to sign a £100 million player in Declan Rice, which obviously is a step up from what Tottenham do. Although you could argue, if you total up the sums, maybe Spurs spent more this season than Arsenal have. If you add in all the £40 million players, the Van der Vens, the Madisons, Brennan Johnsons, and players like that as well. And I guess you have to add in Porro and Kulusevski as well in that bracket, I suppose, too. And Dragusin obviously wasn't cheap. And so, yeah, I still don't know whether they'll ever sign a £100 million player. Like Postecoglou said, I think he is probably right on that, unless the game goes completely crazy. Yeah. But yeah, I get it. I get where he's coming from. I just don't know how helpful it is in terms of the player. I mean, what do you think?
I think we need a target. I think there's got to be a target, and the target at the very beginning of the season, he came out and said it, didn't he? That let the fans dream about finishing top. That was clearly the target, and that's clearly what Ange Postecoglou's target is going to be every single season. It's not. It wasn't viable this season, despite the start to the season that we had. There was never any point where I thought that those first 10 games would be the norm, and we'd do another 10, and then another 10, and then another 8, as it would have turned out to be, to hit the pinnacle. I'd like to think it will be something that we can aim for in the next 2-3 seasons. But yeah, I think having an actual target of Champions League football, finishing in the top 4 this season, being the aim, then perhaps next season to come out and say, well, we want to challenge for the top, but top 2 or 3, and then we'll go for the title. Maybe you can't just write off a season. I understand where he's coming from. You can't just write off a season and go, well, we're quite happy to finish 3rd and just improve on last year. But if you can show that improvement and can put that kind of that carrot that we never seem to eat for the players there, I think you're right, is what we need. I do think you kind of maybe scared a few Tottenham fans by talking about a post-Klopp era and Pep Guardiola leaving Man City, because at the minute it does look like Arsenal are the next in line, essentially. So yeah, don't get too scared, Spurs. we're not thinking that Arsenal are going to be the all conquering team that Man City might have been.
I'm just trying to think. Did any of those clubs that we're now talking about start off flying in their first season under those?
Man City certainly didn't, and Liverpool certainly didn't either.
No,
and we know Arsenal finished 8th in the first season under Arteta, I think, before they then
got the FA Cup, didn't they? Yeah. And I think that's the thing that probably grinds down Spurs fans, is that even being that awful, or not awful, but even being at the start of a journey, they still managed to get an FA Cup. But yeah, I'm just trying to think what clubs someone has come in I suppose that Chelsea were probably the only clubs that would do that because they were set up to survive whatever manager. They were throwing money into it. And so, you know, the likes of Conte and Mourinho could come in and succeed reasonably quickly. But even with Conte, it wasn't first season. I think it was second season, wasn't it? Yeah. So, yeah, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that all of those teams that were challenging, they didn't do it straight away in the first season. They had to build and lay the foundations, which is what Postecoglou is trying to do. But the frustration at Spurs is so ingrained in people that it's almost like, it hasn't happened yet. Why hasn't it happened yet? It's 8 months in. And then you have a game like that that is truly dreadful and is the worst performance of the season so far. And it suddenly feels like the end of the world, and it's time to change again, new project. I mean, who comes in? Even if I'd love to know those people that would already look to get Ange Postecoglou out. Who would you bring in?
Well, yeah.
And I can tell you one of the names that someone put. I saw it. Because I saw someone ask them that question. They said Gary O'Neill.
Oh, blimey.
I know. And it's like, I'm sorry, but how does that suddenly transform everything? You know, he's a good manager. But I would say his style of football is not going to be exactly what you're looking for. You know, that's the kind of football that Spurs fans have been moaning about a little bit in recent years.
Do you know who I thought you were going to say?
Go on. Who?
Thomas Tuchel.
Thomas Tuchel. Yes, he's flying with Bayern at the moment.
I've got a question for you. You've mentioned there, obviously, the Champions League, and Man United and Newcastle weren't equipped for it this season.
Yeah.
Do you think currently we're equipped to challenge in the Champions League next year with the squad that we've got right now?
No, not with the squad this year. It's stronger than people think it is, and I know after a game like that at Fulham, it's very suddenly difficult to see that. But that bench against Fulham was very strong. This is the other side of things as well, is that with a strong squad, with European football, you have to rotate your squad quite heavily. We, as a football fan base at Tottenham Hotspur, don't like rotating the squad. This is the irony, is that we want a strong squad. We want 22 players that can all play a part. And as soon as a manager changes up a team with 7, 8 or more changes for a match, we're like, why have you done that? Play your strongest team. And that's kind of, you know, we saw it in the Carabao Cup, obviously at Fulham as well, and Spurs going out on penalties and stuff. Yeah, we're a funny club, and I'm sure other clubs like that. I don't mean to single out Spurs fans. I'm sure it's all football fans. But right now that squad, no, I don't. I think it lacks another Maddison type. I think it lacks another creator. I think it lacks another natural number 9. Definitely needs another centre-back. He was saying that in the week. He thinks he needs another centre-back. He pretty much said all areas of the squad. And he's right. Both fullbacks, we don't really have natural replacements for them. It is going to be, this could be a very busy summer. I think he said something like, it's got to be about the right players have got to be there. He said, so we might end up just signing 1 or 2. But if we only do sign 1 or 2, then we've got a lot more work to do. So I would imagine it will be another 5-6 signing summer, you would have thought, this year. And obviously, players are going to go. There'll be a few players that are not going to be happy with their game time. Obviously, Højbjerg, Brian Hill. Why he turned down a move to Brighton is just beyond me. Lo Celso, I would imagine, probably hasn't got what he wanted out of this season. Oliver Skipp's going to be an interesting scenario because of Spurs' homegrown numbers. I don't know if Spurs can allow him to go, and I think he desperately needs to go to kind of get his career back on track. So that's a lot of midfielders suddenly come out of your midfield. So you're going to have to replace those. Attack-wise, they'll have to make a decision on Timo Werner. Alejo Velez, what happens with him? And you've got these young players as well. And this is the other thing, we all want transfers, but we also want to see the young players come through. You've got Bergvall coming in, you've got Devine coming back, you've got Ashley Phillips as a young kind of defender, Alfie Dorrington, Jamie Donnelly in the attacking midfield areas as well. Do they get put into this team? I'm hopeful that the pre-season, which we'll talk about at the end, might allow for a lot of these young players to really state their case, because I don't think there's going to be too many first-teamers around for a lot of it. But yeah, in terms of the squad for Champions League right now, no, it would have to be built. And and he does miss European football. He's made that very clear himself. So while I get what he's saying about, you know, growing being the most important thing, he's admitted himself he hates kind of sitting there and watching the Champions League on the telly. He wants to be a part of it. Yeah, where would you say is the biggest areas that if you were playing Champions League football tomorrow, you would need that squad to have?
I think, like you just said about the needing rotation when you play European football. I am guilty of looking at a team, and if I don't see Christian Romero and Mickey van der Ven's names in the centre-back positions, I'm thinking, not too sure about that. You think Radu Dragashan plays, and then Ben Davis potentially alongside him, and I'm thinking it's not. I'm not confident with those two in there. The midfield at the minute, I think, has got enough strength in depth, but you're right. Some will probably more than likely leave in the summer, so that needs rebuilding. And yeah, we went into the season knowing that Harry Kane was going to be leaving, which was great for Richarlison because it would give him his chance to show what he could do, and I think he's taken it with open arms this season. But there is no one else to kind of come in and play that role unless you play Sonny through the middle. And you said it at the beginning there, sometimes you think he's best through the middle, sometimes you think he's best through on the left-hand side. I think my opinion is that he's better on the left. I prefer to play him on the left rather than through the middle. So I think we do need another striker. But keep. Who do
you want up front for Spurs?
I don't know. That's we've got that horrible situation, haven't you? Like we have with Harry Kane, and trying to find someone who was willing to sit on the bench essentially because Harry Kane was the number one. How do you keep two strong centre forwards happy essentially throughout the season?
Is it the same? Is it the same, or no, this summer, can you say come in and be our man?
No, yeah, exactly. You can say that, but then you've got Richarlison. Is he going to be happy sitting on the bench and being second fiddle again? And then a year down the line, you're perhaps playing the same game again, and Richarlison leaves, and you're trying to find someone else to come in.
Well, you might find that Saudi club comes in from this summer with a massive bid.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a few out there. I mean, I'm still not entirely sure where Ivan Toney's going to go.
No.
I think the big kind of odds were on him going to Arsenal, and it doesn't seem to be as strong a link anymore at all. I do wonder whether Spurs, in classic Spurs style, look at a player with a year left in his contract and think, oh, do you know what? And I tell you, he in that system, I think would get so many goals. I wouldn't rule that out entirely, Ivan Toney. I think he would... he'd be in a fantastic addition.
Ollie Watkins is the one I would absolutely love, but he will cost an absolute fortune now.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. And I think he's very settled. He would be phenomenal as well in the system. Whereas that's what I mean. I think even Ivan Toney would be, probably the more available player this year. There's Jimenez in the Eredivisie that everyone's looking at as well. He's scoring lots of goals, and also in the Champions League as well. So it's not just he's a guy in the Eredivisie as well. I liked Muniz. I like Muniz. I think it's still early days for him. I think you can't kind of, he's had, he scored 7 in 7. Didn't have a good season last year at Middlesbrough. So it's not like he's the finished product, but he's only, I think, 22, something like that. So he could be one as well. Yeah, I'm intrigued to see what happens with Richarlison this summer. All kind of indication seems to be that there could be another bid coming in from a Saudi club. Would you take? Let's say you got your money back, 60 million. Would you take it?
Oh, that's horrible, isn't it? Because yes, I probably would, but I'm not. I'm more in the guesty camp with this. In that I like Richarlison. I like what he offers to the team. I actually have grown to like his personality because he was one of those players when he was playing against you. I won't use the term because we'll have to take out certain ads on YouTube and stuff if I swear. But he is that sort of player that you dislike as an opposition player, and I wasn't sure how I would take to him coming to Spurs. Obviously, my eldest son, I think, he's coming around to him because when he came in, he never liked him at all. But yeah, I like what he brings. I think he holds the ball up well. I think he can score goals. I think he brings other players into the match well, and he can be a focal point. But yeah, if someone comes in with £60 million, you'll probably say, all right then, let's go and find someone else. Unfortunately.
It's a difficult one. Yeah, I don't know whether you just take the money you got for him back. I don't know. I do feel like he's made a big contribution this season.
He's Brazil's number 9, for goodness sake.
He is Brazil's number 9. And unless he wanted to go, I would not be forcing him out the door. I do think you would need, Spurs are going to have European football, which we hope they are next season. I do think you need a fair few options up there. I probably wouldn't take it unless you're desperate for the money and that they which they shouldn't be with that cash-generating stadium. I probably wouldn't take it. But, if they go up to silly 70, 80 million, it's kind of a bit like, okay, fair enough. But, I wouldn't probably just take the money back. And I know people would. I think Guesty would probably expect me to have said I would, but
I was just going to say the one who actually quite likes Richarlison would take the money, and the one on the podcast here who's a little bit indifferent towards Richarlison says no, keep him.
I wouldn't say I'm indifferent. I just think I don't know whether he's going to end up being the prolific striker Spurs need. That's my only thing, but I do think what he brings on the pitch is quite a lot. And I still think he's probably going to have quite a big part to play in the rest of this season as well. I still think Tony, for me, is probably the one I would love to see up there. Whether it even ends up being a possibility or not, I don't know. He is represented by CAA Stella, who have quite a decent kind of in at Spurs. They're the ones that used to have Bale. They probably do still have Bale post-retirement. And they've got Ben Davies, Joe Rodon. There's a few players they've got as well. So there's a connection there if it were to happen.
Joe Rodon's an interesting one to come back into the squad.
Yeah, he won't. Which is sad. I think that it's kind of not really been given a look at. I just presume Postecoglou doesn't believe he can play his kind of football, maybe. But he's been superb for Leeds. Yeah. He's been brilliant. I would imagine Leeds will go up and he'll be a Premier League player for Leeds. They'll have to pay a fair chunk of money. They were daft not to get an option in there at the start. And that's the irony, is kind of Joe Rodon is going to be a very good Premier League defender, is going to end up probably supplying the money that will go towards signing his replacement at Tottenham. Yeah, it's just such a strange way it works. But back to your very original question. No, the squad isn't ready for Champions League football yet, but it will be. That will be the if they get Champions League football. I mean, it's still not entirely sure whether even 5th will get it. It's looking more likely than not now, but
it can change, can't it? With teams dropping out of the Champions League and the Europa League and stuff. So
yes, having Bayern drawn against Arsenal and Bayer Leverkusen drawn against West Ham was not ideal.
No.
That really gives, all Germany have to do really is win those two, and suddenly I think it flips straight back in their favour again. But, hey, Postecoglou doesn't care. He's not looking at that. It doesn't matter to him. In his own words, if they finished 5th rather than 4th this season, but he saw growth, he would be more than happy because he knows next season will be a very good one.
Yep. Just before we close out this week's podcast, there's a story gone up on football.london. I would say this morning, but I think it was actually this afternoon. About Tottenham's pre-season plans taking shape, and Spurs are heading back to Postecoglou. Have you lost me?
Only briefly. It was all right. You're back. You're back. Yeah, no, I lost you very briefly there, but. Yes, Spurs are heading down under after the season. I think we're going to get an announcement reasonably shortly on that officially. Down to Melbourne. I don't know how popular this game is going to be with the players. I can't imagine they're going to be absolutely ecstatic about it.
Straight after the end of the season.
Yes, literally on the Wednesday, on the 22nd of May at Melbourne Cricket Ground, the MCG. When they play Sheffield United on the 19th, I'd imagine they'll fly straight off from that game. You lose a day, having done that myself in October, you lose a day completely, and actually going to Perth in the summer. I can't imagine it's going to be the same starting 11 that will face Sheffield United, will then face Newcastle United in Melbourne. You would have to change that up big time. Do you even take the players that are going to the Euros and the Copa America? That's a whole other debate. Although pretty much most of the players will be heading off to international matches as well, friendlies. I mean, Sonny will have, I think, South Korea playing America in a couple of friendlies. So, yeah, it's one of those where we know why it happens. We know it's about money. And, hey, look, if it's a little bit more money to put towards a new striker, fullback, centre-back, whatever, then fine. And it's great for the people of Melbourne. Melbourne, having been there myself, they're a lot of Spurs fans there. They're big Postecoglou fans. He grew up in Melbourne. There are murals of him around the city, a couple of them. I think there's 3 now. So, yeah, it'll be a money spinner for Spurs and for Newcastle. I'd say probably more so for Spurs. It's kind of continuing the building of that fan base there in another market, if we're going to be cynical about it. And yeah, I'm intrigued to see kind of who plays, how it works out. Big crowd, I'd imagine. I think that's like a massive capacity there. It holds something like 100,000, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
It's huge. So that's post-season. And in pre-season, that's starting to kind of take shape as well now. We know that, obviously, again, Copa American Euros, so you're going to have a fair few players not going to be around, but Spurs are lining up a friendly in Scotland. I think it'll be one of their first games, if not the first, in mid-July. Then they've got an Asian tour, which is 3 games. There'll be 1 game first in another Asian country, and then they go to South Korea for a couple of games where they'll play Team K-League and then Bayern Munich, although I'd imagine that will also be a very shorn Bayern Munich of its stars who have been at the Euros and Copa America. And then I'd be pretty certain that there'll be I would be stunned if there's not a home game before the season starts, because they'll get back from the tour and then they'll have a free weekend just before the season starts. The season starts on August 17th, so you'd imagine, August 10th, maybe that Saturday or the Sunday, there'll be some kind of money-spinning home game against big opposition, you would think. And I think last year they fitted in the Barcelona game in midweek as well, so it might be there's a midweek game for another 11 to get minutes. So, yeah, a very busy and world-travelling time to come for Spurs. It's the modern way in football. And someone made a great point. I'm bashing social media a fair bit today, but someone made a really good point on social media. I think it was yesterday, that people moaning about tourist fans in the stadium. You can't then moan if the club then goes to play out there, so those tourist fans don't have to desperately come because they'll never see their team play. You can't have it kind of or not have it either way, or something like that. And having been very fortunate enough to be around the world and see the passion of these fans across the world, why not? It's great for them to experience and see their heroes up close, although maybe after Saturday's game they might say, no, you can keep it. Maybe don't come over. But yeah, it's going to be a busy one.
Well, we just the kind of old adage of players getting tired just doesn't bear fruit anymore, does it? When they've got all these preseason tours and Euros and Copa America and this, that, and the other to fit in during the off season, you're not allowed to get tired, are you? You're not allowed to use that as an excuse anymore. No,
in a way, it's lucky that the Asian Cup and Africa Cup of Nations were in mid.
Exactly.
Season. Otherwise, it would have been a crazy summer. But yeah, I don't think it's any shock that with so many players at the Copa American Euros, they're going to South Korea, where we know Sonny's around, and obviously a massive market for Spurs there. And they're going to Australia, where their manager comes from, and there's a massive emerging market for Spurs as well. So yeah, it's all very carefully planned out, whether you like that sort of stuff or not. But it is more money towards the transfer coffers for the summer. So hey, it kind of swings and roundabouts, I guess.
And it's not a bad destination for those Tottenham fans who can afford to get out there and watch it as well from this country. So plan your holidays around that.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much as usual, Ali. We will leave it there for this episode of Golden Guest Talk Tottenham. Keep your eyes on football.london for all your latest Tottenham news. And to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/goldguest. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and you'll help support our podcast too. The link is in the episode description box.